So, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes like YouTube, I have to block out the fuck and all, so they don't punish me. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, childrens of all ages, tonight is the night we have our buddy Jeff with us, and he has some sort of rumor has it best-selling book beyond the headlines: True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. Can you believe you're a best-selling author?
No. Oh man, I'll tell you, when I saw it, I was like, somebody actually messaged me first. And they said, "You realize it just hit number one bestseller." I was like, "What? The hell are you talking about?" And so I went there, and when I got there, it said number two. And I said, "Oh, you must be joking. Like you just messing with me, right?" And about 8 hours later, it hit number one again on Amazon. And so I watched it, of course, immediately. I took a picture of it. So I had proof. I think I made it a whole 8 hours as a number one bestseller on Amazon, which is not so bad when there's like, I don't know, 200,000 books every week that debut on Amazon. So I'm in a sea of novels.
Yeah, and for you to be a best-selling author via Amazon, as I grab a glass of whiskey, and that you wrote this whole book in crayon is unbelievable.
I know it's unreal, man.
So, how long's the book been out? What, about a month at this point?
Yeah, it's just over a month. It debuted July 2nd, which was 2 days before my birthday. So,
Cheers to that. Well, I guess I should say, for those who may not be familiar, the book seems to offer more than just a gripping of true crime stories by delivering into or delving, I should say. I haven't even drank yet. That's the scary part. Uh, into the myths and misconceptions surrounding infamous figures like Jack the Ripper, Brian, your ass better show up when you're done recording your gig, Dennis Rader, Ed Gein, who our buddy Kane Hodder has played in a movie, Ted Bundy, etc. So it's definitely an interesting read, but it's going to be three parts if I remember hearing that correctly, right, Jeff?
yeah, it is. We've got volume one is all on serial killers. So we cover 10 different serial killers in volume one. Volume two will be criminals. So we'll cover 10 different criminals, everyone from Billy the Kid. And then the last chapter will be on Jeffrey Epstein. And then the the third volume will be on cults and religions. So that'll actually be 15 chapters because I was getting ready to go visit Eric Freeman in Cleveland. Chapters. And I realized that I needed to add Anton LaVey and Satanism, as well as Aleister Crowley and occultism. And I didn't have those in there yet. I already had 10 cults picked out and religions. Those in there yet. I already had 10 cults.
Sorry, I was answering a comment.
Oh, I'm like, I hear myself.
Yeah,
So,
you do.
yeah, I decided to expand that one to 15 chapters, and we'll cover all of those. Of course, we'll cover the Catholic Church, and I'll really
That's a
piss a whole
crime in
bunch of
itself.
people off.
That's a encyclopedia right there on material. Yes, I said it.
Absolutely.
All right. You know, I mean, I should probably just. I gotta hire somebody to answer the questions for me. Fuck this shit. But so for those who aren't familiar with Jeff as well, which obviously two things, full disclosure, because I like to do that. Jeff and Scorpion Lair Games is a sponsor of the show. So first and foremost, I want to be honest with everybody, but who also haven't listened to the other two episodes talking about Killers, their card game and stuff, and have heard Jeff's background and experience and such. You and I actually just learned this, but it wasn't from you. You were a trained chef before you got into doing what you're doing? So was it Waffle
Uh,
House or Denny's you started working at?
it's actually Wendy's. I had my very first job at Wendy's when I was, God, I was in high school still, working at Wendy's there in Delaware. And when I was in high school, I was in a culinary arts class, and I went from that class to then going to college, and I went to Pittsburgh, and I got my degree in culinary arts at the Pennsylvania Culinary. At the time that I was going there, it was number three in the nation, just behind Johnson and Wales and CIA. It was actually a decent school. After I graduated, Le Cordon Bleu took over, and the program went to shit. And now there is not even a Pennsylvania Culinary in Pittsburgh. It's gone. Just like the Art Institute, it kind of went by the wayside and was one of those things that ended up flushing itself out. But when I went there, it was a great school. I owned a personal chef service for a long time that went really, really well until about 2008 when the economy just took a shit. And so all those luxury services disappeared. I always kind of kept it in my back pocket just in case I ever had to go back to it. But I've been afforded a lot of opportunity. And during that time, I also started working for the Department of Juvenile Justice, and I started working specifically with kids. I actually started at a children's home before that, and I was working in direct care with the kids there. And then I moved on to the Department of Juvenile Justice and really, really learned a lot of skills while I was there in psychology and taking a lot of the things that I learned when I was a kid and then kind of translating them into modern psychology. So I got to learn a lot of things there. And, that all has kind of bridged the gap to where I am today, talking about, serial killers and psychology and all of that stuff, which has been a lot of fun.
Well, obviously you don't have a degree in psychology, but you got your understanding working in, like you said, with the kids, then going into the prison system for a little bit, working there and such. Who would you say was more difficult to deal with? Was it the kids or the adults?
The kids, for sure. The adults typically, unless they're mentally ill, will listen to reason and they understand, for the most part, they understand consequences and, you can talk to them a little bit. You can appeal to them through a variety of different ways to get them under control. Kids between the ages of about 8 and 13 have no concept of consequences. They don't understand anything outside of themselves. They can't see that they have, another 80 years of life left and that they will reshape themselves and they'll change themselves many, many times over the next 60 to 80 years that they have of life. So those kids are only living in the moment and they only know what they know. So if they've come from a really violent background or a very abusive situation, that's all they know. And that's the only way that they can interact with the world around them. Those kids are very, very difficult to deal with because they have no concept of any of that. They just don't understand that there could be a tomorrow that is radically different from the today that they're living and that they could actually affect their lives and change that. So yeah, it always that age group specifically has always been really difficult. And we know, from psychology that it's those formative years that are just before that, when you're 3 to about 8, where a lot of the things in your life are going to like kind of cement who you are for the rest of your life, or at least cause enough trauma in your life to follow you through the rest of your life. So, dealing with that stuff early is a really good thing. You could really curb a lot of the stuff that we see later on from a lot of these serial killers if they would have dealt with the things from their childhood early enough. And all of us, to a certain extent, deal with that and struggle. So anyway,
Now,
it's interesting because you
well, I'll put
mentioned.
it this way. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I have a very, very practical knowledge of psychology, mainly because I've been fucked up all my life. I come from the East Coast, right? And
I can
so
testify he's right.
I
No.
have struggled with a lot of that stuff personally. So figuring out how to come through that and to deal with it and really try to make a lot of strides to change my own life made me a good candidate to really understand how other people can go through those things and really work with them. So my knowledge of that is very practical. Unlike a lot of people that go to school and they read books and they have a good education, but they have zero practical knowledge of how to deal with people and really don't understand people and don't understand human behavior. A lot of those people really struggle. Not saying that they're not good, but they struggle with that. And that's something that I spent a lot of my time, growing up on the street and dealing with a lot of people and gangs and stuff like that as a kid. If you can't understand human behavior, you don't make it out of childhood, right? They kill you right then and there. So I had to learn a lot of that very, very early, like how to read people and to understand like where danger is.
Yeah, there's a difference, like you said, between street smarts and book smarts.
For
And
sure.
not that they don't intermingle, but you have to be able to understand it too. And obviously, you and me have had conversations that can't be had here, some of the personal experiences between the two. But those are the stories we leave for when we're sitting at the bar. But yeah, because then you think, oh, it's just the alcohol talking. But with that being, you mentioned a minute ago about professional help, and obviously the evolution of psychology has evolved over these many years because they would lock people away, lock and key, and all that stuff, and screw them and not have an understanding. Where, to quote a physician I know, he says, think about it when it comes to a physical health. If me or Jeff or anybody watching and or will watch us has a heart attack, we break a leg, we whatever, something physical, there's a game plan based on scans and all that stuff on how they would treat the physical ailment, the heart attack, the broken leg, a stroke, etc. Where the family physician friend of the family says, think about how little we know when it comes to mental health and psychology and how much we are learning because we don't like the same. If me and Jeff could have the same diagnosis of something, but what would work for me won't work for Jeff.
For sure.
But something that would work for Jeff might not work for me, Ray, Jody, whatever. So it's
Yeah, it's
evolving.
and I think it is. I think that it is constantly changing. I think we live in some scary times. I think that there are a lot of people that are struggling with some serious mental illness, whatever, as technology improves, as we get further and further removed, like right now we're on a Zoom call, right, on Facebook Live, right? Whenever before in the history of man have we ever been able to like have this kind of rapport with one another? Never, right? This
Exactly.
presents a whole new set of challenges for people because we become more and more disconnected. Like it's a whole different story when you're actually sitting in front of people and you have to speak. Like, right, I get up in front of hundreds of people and talk. And
I've seen this.
it's a whole different thing when you're standing there in front of people. And we've all experienced this too. There are a lot of keyboard warriors, right? You can say whatever the hell you want on the internet,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of things that you're not going to say in front of my face when I'm standing 3 feet from you, right? So I think it provides a whole different psychology, and the field of psychology is going to have to catch up, right? There's all kinds of new disorders, much more anxiety in the world that we live in that was never there before because people had experiences with real people, right? They got out,
Yeah.
they lived life, they experienced that. You don't actually have to do that anymore. You could get a virtual job, sit on your virtual computer, play on your virtual phone, and never interact with another human being if you choose not to. That's a scary thing. How do we develop uh, humanity when all we're doing is talking through virtual devices. It's crazy because, until you're with someone, until you see them as a real person, if all they are is on the screen, we're going to have more and more and more problems if we can't figure out a way to teach people what humanity is. Uh, it's a lot of why we're seeing the rise in a lot of different crimes and mass murder and stuff like that, because there's such a disconnect with reality and humanity. There is no connection anymore, which makes it really, really easy to get up like you're playing, Call of Duty and shoot a bunch of people and not feel anything because you have no connection with human beings anymore. It presents a lot of challenges for the people that are in the field of psychology now. How do we deal with those things? How do we catch them early enough? How do we get them into programs? How do we get them to a place where they're not just sitting in their basement thinking of ways to do this and to harm other people? I don't know. I don't know the answers for that. Uh, I think it is a very, very difficult problem that we're going to face as we move forward and as technology continues to increase. I think it's going to be a bigger and bigger problem.
Well, I'm not going to get into politics here, but with the no, yeah, exactly. But part of what you're saying too is, and folks, I'm independent. I will say that, but you know, with what Jeff's saying as far as programs and things like that, you might see like the Democrats be more of social issues and taking care of everybody as much as we can, where the Republicans are money and all that. Like I said, we're not going to get into politics, but there's both sides have different views on a lot of the social issues like mental health and programs and stuff like that. The book, as I said, is Beyond the Headlines: True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. If anybody has questions, if you're in the Zoom room, let me know in the chat. Also, if you're watching via Facebook, let us know there. We will get to that as I monitor the Facebook as best I can. But you mentioned technology, and I was listening to something you did recently, Jeff, and that
Oh,
being, yeah, no, this was actually good. This wasn't the normal nonsense, but you were talking about when it comes to crime and trying to solve crimes and stuff. Obviously, when you watch shows like CSI and Law and Order and things like that, they're in a nice, neat little package for the hour episode. But most of the time in real life, that's not the case when you're trying to solve a crime, a murder, whatever you're, hell, a speeding ticket. You know what I mean? It's not so nice and neat. So, how much do you think the improvement in technology has allowed in trying to solve crimes and look at some of these cases and such?
I think it's a double-edged sword, honestly. Uh, I think as much as we try to solve crimes and we use technology to do that, the criminals are out there trying to find new ways to use that same technology to commit more crime. so, so it becomes really a double-edged sword because it's not just criminology that is and forensics that are getting a boost and we're learning more and we're growing more, and as we have more people interested in the field, that they develop more uh, assessments, they develop newer standards to be able to get quicker results and all of those things. Those same criminals that are doing that are using the same material to get further and further away and to mask themselves more and more. Uh, Also, not to be political, but I think it's interesting, and this is just because it's recent. But when we look at Thomas Crooks, right, the guy who shot former President Trump, right?
Hmm.
When we look at that guy and they were doing the forensic analysis on all of his social media, there were several things that they can't get into because they're encrypted, right? They're used through, like, I don't know if he was using WhatsApp or he was using something else. All of those things are encrypted. So, you know, how do you have an encrypted app that people, anybody can use, criminals can use, but law enforcement and even the FBI cannot get into that encryption. Now, what do you do? Because people need privacy, right? You don't want the government to get into all of your business and, be looking at all this stuff. But how do we then, when you have these crazy events that happen, whoever it is, on whatever side you fall on, but whenever anybody is injured or there's a crime that happens and they're using these things, you know, does that give these criminals a way that they can now evade capture? They can evade surveillance because they're using those things. I think it is a perfect example of, as our technology grows, so does everything else. And now we need better and better people out there that can figure out ways to crack that stuff and get into there so that they can get the information. It's the same thing with like the dark web, right? You can get on
Mhm.
there. I could get on there today and go and buy fentanyl, like, and have it at my house in like an hour, right? You can buy all kinds of shit on the dark web. You can buy people, right? And it's unbelievable to me that they can track some of that. I was watching a show the other night. They did season 2 of Worst Roommate Ever, and there's a girl on there that was trying to kill her roommate, and she was going and buying insulin off the dark web, and she was injecting her after she would knock her out with some kind of medication. She would drug her with something at dinner, and when she was knocked out, she would inject her with insulin. Well, this lady is not diabetic, so it would end up dropping her blood glucose level, and she would go into a medical emergency. Now, she couldn't kill her. She tried several times, but it didn't work. But then she ended up buying this crate. It's called Versa, and I had never heard of it before, but it is even worse than MRSA. It is a staph infection that like virtually no antibiotics can take care of, right? And so she did inject her with MRSA first, and then went to the dark web and ordered some Versa, and ended up injecting her with that. And she almost died from that. Now, luckily, this lady survived, but the way that they caught her is they were able to track her internet usage, and they got to be able to see that she was on the dark web. They saw the things that she was purchasing. They were able to get in there and record all of that. So that's how they caught her. Now, that is supposed to be untraceable, right? So I don't know the methods that they have, the way that they can do that, but I'm glad that they can. For regular people like us who are not trying to kill other people and harm other people, it's a good thing that they can do that. However, if you're a criminal, probably not a good thing for you if they can go on there and track everything that you're doing. But
So I guess
I've
I won't
used
talk about that one time we tried to do something. Never mind. Yeah, well,
that was all you. It had nothing to do with me.
yeah. Hey, you were the escape driver, but who are you talking about now? Hey Jody, do you want to bring that up about the diagnosis thing you just messaged me about?
Yeah, I was just saying my little one has a new diagnosis. First it was like ADHD and ODD. Now it's a new one called DMDD. So it's like dysregulation, no, disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. So it's kind of like ADHD and the ODD together. But they want to put her on Prozac, and she's still violent and all that, and technology thing you were talking about. It's hard to get them off of it without a fight. So I'm just trying to find new ways and new ideas of how to go about this. And she, like, got her psychiatrist, all this stuff. So I'm just curious on your take on that, because you were talking about new diagnosis and all that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and since
think
you worked
that.
with kids too, so that makes
Yes,
sense.
yes. I remember because I asked last time about my daughter.
So I think that it's difficult, right?
Hmm.
There are constantly new classifications coming out every year. There are all these new classifications. That is not one that I've even heard of. So, but I
Yeah,
understand
brand new.
that
Yeah.
yeah, I understand the need for it. And sometimes it's that they're changing the name from something else. Like, for example, multiple personality disorder has changed into something else now. Same thing with Munchausen's syndrome by proxy, right? They've now changed that into something else. It's no longer called Munchausen's. So it's like, oh, it's multiple personality is, oh, Oh, I can't think of what it's called now. I had it and then it's
I'll
gone.
look
But
it up.
yeah,
And I know
it's
Asperger's used to be a thing, and it's not. It's all on the spectrum now.
yeah,
I think.
it's the
Yeah.
same. So they keep evolving that, and I think the main reason why they keep evolving it, sadly to say, is in conjunction with the medical field, right? Because then they can classify drugs specifically for that.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist necessarily, but there is definitely some kind of conjunction there. But you know, it's difficult. One of the things that I would suggest for anybody is if you're going to have your kids on medication, there is a test that they can take that I think it's a blood test or something, but it will show what medications they're responsive to, right? And so if you're going to have them on some of those serious SSRIs and stuff, getting that test done to see what's going to be most effective and easiest to metabolize into their system, it's worthwhile to spend the money and get that testing done. So you're not just screwing around and wasting a bunch of money and, basically a chemistry set on your own kid and all these different medications. They'll prescribe them and they'll try this for a little while. You have to do this for 6 months or a year, and then you switch to something else if it's not working. Getting that testing kind of kicks it. You'll know right away what's going to work, and then you
Mhm.
can start using that. So I am not someone that will tell somebody that their child does not need to be on medication. I think
Yeah.
that's a very personal decision, and I think that there are people that need to be on medication. I
Yeah.
think that there are also people that need to learn coping mechanisms and
Yeah.
strategies on how to deal with things. But when you're talking about children, they aren't able to do that. They can't self
Right.
regulate, right? Until their brain is fully formed. And even after that, they are not going to be able to understand those things and they can't understand larger concepts. So, trying to teach a child, all of these things are not helpful, right?
Yeah.
The best that you can do is to try to keep talking to them, keep an open rapport, and really have real conversations so they feel comfortable coming to
Yeah.
you when they're struggling with whatever or they're feeling however they're feeling, so that you can help them walk through that because that's what they really need. How
Yeah.
many
That's
years and years have we all relied on our friends and our family to help us through some of the bullshit that we face in
yeah.
life?
Yeah. And that's why I'm getting her into counseling and psychiatrists. And I didn't know about that test because they're like, oh, we'll try this. And if it doesn't work, that means she has this instead. So I'm like, okay, that's not a way to diagnose. But they never
Yeah.
mentioned anything about blood tests or anything. You don't diagnose by just trying different medicines. So I'm like, no, I want to know for sure before she's not a guinea pig. Right.
Let me see what that testing is called because I'm not sure
And
right off
while
the
you're
top of my
looking
head.
that up, Jeff, I do want to say, according to Google, because you were talking about multiple personality there and it changing a name, I got dissociative identity disorder.
Identity disorder, DID. That's
So,
it.
yeah. But I'd be curious to know when they do that blood work, and we're not medical medical professionals here, folks. But
Absolutely not.
yeah, just want to go full disclosure on that one too. But I'd be curious to know, since they can do tests like that, which I'm not surprised, would, and I'm not throwing Jody under the bus here, but like, would the test results of her daughter change, say, as she is now, than after she goes through puberty? And I mean, the different, you, depending on the stage of life
Absolutely.
you're in, would the
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? Your just
Yeah,
because of your chemical balance.
absolutely. As your body chemistry changes and all of those things happen, it is a good idea to get that again because your body chemistry does not stay the same throughout your life. It changes at different levels, especially for women. It is different because there are so many hormonal changes that women go through. Their chemistry changes much, much more than men. We have some minor changes and things happen, testosterone lowers, things like that. But women really, really deal with that. And again, I am not a professional on, definitely not a professional on women. But, I do know that hormones change a lot, and that really plays a large role in, medications and metabolization of those medications. And yeah, it is a constant, ever evolving thing.
Yeah, and I know like she's been bullied a lot too, and it's a product of their environment as well. It can change how their outcome and how they, deal with other people as well. So she's, because of being bullied, she was worried about being a bully and started acting out and being more violent as well. And I know your body changes every 7 years or whatever too. So put that into factors. She's 7 years old now, so you know what I mean? It's gonna start changing again. So I don't want to mess too much with any chemicals, but like some of the principals and that at the school are like, well, think of a diabetic needing insulin. And I'm like, well, that's true, but I don't know what kind of insulin she needs, right?
Yeah.
If you're putting it in
So
that metaphor.
Go back to testing her blood and seeing what would
Yeah,
work for her, I would assume.
exactly.
yeah, I think that, specifically SSRIs, right? That type of medication should never be a solution.
Yeah.
It should always be something that is taken for a little while to help you get through and to help you cope with some things as you're looking for strategies on
Hmm.
how to really deal with life, right? And as
Yeah.
you learn those strategies and as you get through that, you lower off the medicine and you pick that up when you're able to. It should not be ever be a long-term solution where
Yeah.
people are like, and honestly, we don't know the side effects of a lot of that stuff long term,
And the
right? A lot of
damage to
these
the kidney and liver and all that. Yeah.
correct.
That's what
So
I keep
you
saying
yeah,
to the doctors. I'm like, I don't want it to be forever. This isn't, they're like, well, it doesn't have to be. I'm like, well, it's not gonna be, because she can do programs and do behavior therapy kind of stuff instead of doing meds, you know. But I don't know
okay,
if that's
so it is actually a genetic testing, right?
oh, okay.
This there's a company that called GeneSight that does it.
Okay.
It's a DNA test for psychiatric and depression medication. So
Oh, okay.
specifically SSRIs. So
Yeah.
they can do this genetic testing and check out and see like what genes you have that are on and which ones are off and which
Okay.
medication would actually be able to help you.
Oh,
So
okay.
so yeah, it's a fascinating uh, testing, something
Yeah.
again that we could never have done until now.
Yeah.
Before it's always been like, hey, we'll just test this out until we find something that works. Well, the
Yeah.
problem is what does that do to your body in the meantime? Well, you're testing all this shit out that may not be helpful for you. Like,
Yeah.
go get some testing done and see what genetics are playing a factor in that and see what actually works for you.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure how much that testing costs. I have no idea. I don't know if insurance will cover it. I have no clue about any of that stuff. But if it's possible, it's worthwhile to look into, and it could be really helpful.
Yeah,
I would
definitely.
say,
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I would
No
say,
problem.
and I don't know, I'm learning of this because Jeff, but would this be something that because you mentioned a company and whatnot, well, would this be something that she can ask her daughter's pediatrician and or
Absolutely,
specialist about?
absolutely.
Who would she ask best about this if she wants to do it?
Whoever's prescribing the medication should know about the genetic testing for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
because she
You
has a
know,
psychiatrist, and I asked if I should get a pediatrician just for about another diagnosis, and he's like, "Well, yeah, but he doesn't really talk, and we haven't had any in person yet." So I'm like, maybe I should find another one. I don't know, because he mostly talks to me. He hasn't even talked to her, and then when I start telling him, he's like, "Too much information." I'm like, "But you need to know it all." So I don't know. I might
yeah.
have to. I'm still looking for, but we have our family doctor and all that. They send us to different specialists, so. I'm looking, and she's waiting for counseling, and there's a place because I'm in Canada, so there's a place that does it's because she's kind of on the spectrum, I guess they consider it. So they have a place for autism services. So I'm waiting to get her into that. They have a behavior program and cognitive thing, so it helps with them. So I'm trying different routes, but yeah, it's just she can't. She last year she wasn't able to go to school much because she was too
Yeah.
violent, and you know what I mean. So it's but she was bullied a lot around here. So I
So
was trying to. We had to switch schools, and she's a fighter, not a flighter. So when she's put in a corner,
yeah,
she's fighting back and getting in trouble. So
I know exactly how that is. I have ADHD and struggle with ODD and
yeah,
OCD myself. So,
yeah,
like going through and as a child dealing with that stuff, I was very violent. And,
yeah,
I got kicked out of school in sixth grade because people would say things to me and I'd get up in the middle of the classroom and I'd smack the shit out of them.
Yeah.
That's
That's
just
like her
how
in
I
grade
was.
one.
Yeah. I was really bad. I mean, I got kicked out in the fifth
Wow.
grade of one school, went to another one, and I figured out by that time if I waited until we were walking home, we could fight then. And if I didn't fight during the school day, I wouldn't get in trouble. I did break a kid's nose
Oh,
in
wow.
class one time. I think I was in eighth grade, and it's really kind of a shame because later on, like 10 years later, I found out that it really wasn't his fault, but there was a car accident outside, and we all like jumped up out of our desk to go look, and I was, I guess, short then. Good night. I need more to drink. But I was standing on top of my book bag, and this kid knocked me off. And I was like, what the fuck? So I pushed him and he pushed me back and then I hit him. And I broke his nose and blood shot out everywhere. Well, later on, 10 years later, I found out that it wasn't even him. It was a kid next to him that pushed him into me. And
Oh,
I
no.
broke his nose for no reason. But, it happens.
Yeah.
Huh.
So how did you finally cope with all that, like, and the behavior stopping and all that? Because that's what mine's going through now, and she's like I said, 7 years old, and already getting kicked out of class. She's only half day schools; they can't handle her. So I'm trying to get
I
that.
I don't know. I have never been on medication for any of my
Okay.
issues. A lot of it was I also grew up on the street.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of motivation to realize that, I wasn't the biggest on the hill and
Okay.
there were other people that could hurt me. And
Yeah.
so I had to learn how to really like socialize with people and get some good friends. So people who were pissed off at me didn't come and kill me. So,
Yeah.
I kind of grew up in that whole kind of lifestyle. So it taught me a lot about what I could and couldn't do.
Yeah.
And as we live in a society where we're more and more removed from that, there's a lot more accessibility for kids to basically do whatever they want. There's very little consequences. And she's 7 years old. 7 years old, like I already mentioned, that age between like 7, 8 to 13 is tough, man. They don't
Yep.
understand. They
Yep.
just don't see consequences for their actions. They
No.
don't understand those things. They don't see past tomorrow. So if
Yep.
there's a crisis that's happening right now in their life, it is the biggest thing that's ever been, and
Yeah.
it's never going to be any different.
Yep.
So it's really, really difficult to deal with that because even if you get them to realize at 8 a.m. that, okay, I shouldn't act like this, by 3 p.m., they've forgotten all about that and it's back to whatever that crisis is.
Yeah.
So it's very, very difficult to deal with that. I think, you do the best that you can. Obviously, you're doing as much as you can as a parent and trying to take care of all that stuff. I think you just keep working on that. And
Yeah.
as she gets older, just keep reminding her that you're there and that you
Yep.
love her and that you're going to do the best that you can. And
Yep.
eventually, as she gets older and she starts understanding that stuff, she'll hopefully build the coping mechanisms to be able to deal with a lot of those things and confide
Yeah.
in you. You're going to run into another spot when she gets about 14,
Yeah.
when she realizes that mom is always wrong and never
Yeah.
gives shit about me. And then from about the time of 14 until she's about 25, she's not going to want to have anything to do with you. And that's going to be a really hard moment
Yeah.
because all of this time that you're taking to try to take care of her and make sure that she's okay, and then all of a sudden they turn their back on you. But you have to remember that that is normal,
Yeah.
and that is a part of life, right? We've all done it, every
I
single one
actually
of
really
us.
needed to hear that right now because my oldest is 23 and she's doing that exact same thing right now. Like, just haven't talked to me, and she kind of cut me off for a bit. And I'm like, why? She's like doing her own thing. So I like really kind of need to hear that too.
Yeah,
Remember, it's a part, it's normal.
it
So
is.
yeah.
It's a part of life. We all decide at some point we think that we need to be independent. We think that we need to do our own thing, and then
Yeah.
we realize, about 30, we realize, oh shit, maybe I was wrong all those times. It takes a
Yep.
while, right?
Yeah.
It takes a long time to realize that, like, oh, maybe somebody was right. Maybe they were trying to save me from some of this bullshit that I just now went through, right?
Yeah.
Human beings are stubborn.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate all that. So it can
Yeah,
be done
absolutely.
with meds. That's what I like to know, because like everyone's just pushing the meds. So and I'm just trying to do everything else like counseling and trying to keep her busy going to parks. She's really good like socially out with other people. It's just not around here because of the bullies. But other than that, she's good. So it's good to know that, it's not forever and she doesn't have to be on like, I'm just going a different route. But I'm definitely gonna look into that testing. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jody, if you want, when we're done, I will send you Jeff's way. That way he can send recommendations
Actually, I
and
think I
you
already
guys
have
can
him on my
communicate.
friends list from last time.
Okay. Well, okay. So,
So I appreciate that. Thank you.
uh, Jeff, and like I said, reason we're doing this beyond the headlines, the book, but Ed on Facebook asked, or first he comments, seems mostly men are the killers and most women victims. Only can think of a few women serial killers. But he also asks, is it usually a mental illness being the main reason of serial killers? Or is it people that are totally sane and just kill?
Okay, so two different questions
There's
there.
a lot there, I know.
Yeah, so the first one, we'll deal with that one first. There are a lot of female killers. I have a whole expansion in my card game that has 70 female killers in it. Not all serial killers, because typically women don't kill for the same reasons that men do. There are a few female serial killers. You have Eileen Wuornos. You've got like Dorothea Puente, people like that were obvious serial killers that killed because they fulfilled some kind of psychological need, right? And honestly, that's the real definition of a serial killer, is somebody that has killed more than one, or I guess technically it's two or more with a cooling off period, which means that they have taken some time off, that it is solitary events, right? That they kill at one time and then they wait and they kill at another time. But all of that is always done to satisfy some kind of psychological need, right? Women don't always kill for those reasons. There are a lot of women that kill for money. There are mercy killers that kill. And when you start adding them up together, there are a bunch. It is not just exclusively men. Women kill too, and women often are harder to catch, not because they're smarter or anything else, but because people and society for so long has not believed that women could kill. It is a misconception that we think that maybe women aren't aggressive enough to kill, or women just wouldn't do that. It's one of the reasons why Lizzie Borden got off, right? They acquitted her because they didn't believe that she could kill them, her parents. I think that that is incorrect. I think she did kill them. Matter of fact, I talk about it in Beyond the Headlines, True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. But yeah, I think that there are plenty of women out there that do kill. I think for often reasons that we don't always fully understand. So the other question, remind me what that second question was again, because
Hold on,
I
let me get
forget
back
now.
to it. Let me go back to it because Jody, who you were just speaking with, sent me a photo about female killers.
Okay.
So I'll send that and put that up as well. Let's see. He, he
Yeah,
was
I think it
asking
was
about.
from
Sorry, go ahead, Jody.
1999. 1999, I think this was written.
Cool.
Or 1994. It's copyright. I've had it for a long
Okay.
time. I just found
Nice.
it. So I don't know how to flip this thing. I don't know how to flip it. I can take things apart, but I'm not technical with this. But yeah, here it's like that there. So I've had that forever. It's
Oh
True
yeah.
Crime Encyclopedia, yeah. And I've had it
Nice.
forever. I love these kind of books. So since you were just talking about it, it's like funny. I just found this the other day and you started talking about this. So I just had to throw that out there. Thanks.
Cool.
Thank
All
you,
right. What was
Jody.
that other question?
Okay, so back to our normally scheduled program. But no, he was asking essentially, uh, when it comes to serial killers and such, is it mental illness, COVID?
Okay.
No,
Is it meant?
or is it just people are, you know, killing to kill?
So, okay. So, there are a couple different thoughts on this. And I don't know, I can't necessarily say who is right and who is wrong. However, uh, it depends on your definition of mental illness, right? There are some people that believe anyone that would kill is mentally ill, right? Because they can't be sane if they would be able and willing to kill another human being, right? You have some people that are on that side of the fence. There are also, and I can't say that I'm necessarily in that camp, because there are several killers that are not mentally ill, that full well know exactly what the hell they're doing and choose to do it anyway, right? Ted Bundy is one of those people. Did Ted Bundy have some issues? Did he possibly have a few disorders? Maybe. But he was in full control. He knew exactly what he was doing. Dennis Rader is another one that knew exactly what he was doing. He did not have, he wasn't classically mentally ill. You know, somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer, on the other hand, is somebody that certainly had some interesting mental illnesses that gave him the compulsion to do what he did. Another one is, trying to think what his name is now. Oh my goodness. Um, he just died not too long ago. I don't know why I can't think of him. Well, anyway, Richard Chase. Richard Chase is another one that was severely mentally ill, like was schizophrenic, had a lot of issues, and went and killed people and drank their blood and blended babies and all kinds of stuff, because he was mentally ill, right? So there is definitely a different classification, between these different mentally ill killers and other ones that are absolutely not mentally ill, that have full grasp of what they're doing and choose to do it anyway. So I don't know that that helps answer that question, but no, I don't believe that all of them are mentally ill. I think all of them are definitely suffering from some issues, but there are some of them that I would not consider classically mentally ill. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. I'm guessing they're doing many studies on that kind to decipher some of that
Oh,
stuff.
for sure. For sure. There's always people that are researching it to see, it becomes hard after they're like, I mean, Gacy is somebody who really, really, he knew exactly what he was doing. He, knew until the day he died. But once they're dead, it's awful hard to go back and, figure out what kind of mental illness or what kind of things that they were struggling with. We're all then taking a shot in the dark. And during the time that they were alive, they, we didn't have the same techniques, the same things that we have now that could identify those things. And not that we're perfect now, right? We still struggle with it. There's more mass murder now than there ever has been. So clearly, we're not being able to identify these people early enough, and we're not getting something together. And it becomes increasingly difficult because it's not like the killer next door is going to walk up and say, "Hey, what I really need is I think I need a little bit of counseling," right? They don't do that. So there has to be another way. And it used to be that a lot of these killers would start off with petty crimes, right? They would commit these petty crimes, and then it would lead into bigger and bigger and bigger things. We're not seeing that as much anymore. We're seeing kids that maybe have been bullied and that decide that they're going to go and shoot everybody in the school, or everybody at work. So it's not quite the same as we used to have. There is a whole new classification. There is a whole new way that we're going to have to figure out, how do we identify these people? How do we figure out like what that looks like before they go on some crazy murderous rampage? It is not easy, and it is not an exact science, right? But it makes it really challenging for the world that we live in now, because we don't see as many of these classical serial killers that have been killing people for 30 years. And, we don't see that as much anymore because they don't get away with it for that long. What you get is one person kills one other person and they go to jail for the rest of their life. So it's not quite the same. We don't have the same history as we once did. And a lot of that was because we had faulty police systems, right? There wasn't a nationwide database of fingerprinting. There wasn't a nationwide database of DNA, right? So, like, that stuff has changed the entire landscape of police work and of catching a lot of these criminals so much faster than they would have ever been caught before.
And you you've mentioned it before, and even a little bit right there, of reading between the lines, which could be scary with me. But we all had those moments where you go, like if you're driving down the highway, you're doing this, and somebody cuts you off. Did you see that some bitch? Or you get that, man, I whoop that mother. You know what I mean? We all have those moments. So how much is it we're blowing off steam, do you think, to something will click in somebody when you're having those moments?
So I think it's a really case by case situation because I am a firm believer that everybody has the capability to kill, right? We've talked about this before. I think it depends on circumstance. I think it depends on what's going on. I think it depends on what's happening in our life at that moment, right? If I was driving home from work and my family just left me, I just lost my job, I have no prospects, I've got nothing else, and somebody cuts me off, and I, ram the side of their car and blow them away. Uh, doesn't make it justified, but it is a whole lot easier for that to happen given those life circumstances because I feel that there's no way out, right? When we're, like Jody mentioned, when you're backed into a corner, you either fight or flight, right? And so there are people that once they lose everything or they believe that they've lost everything, they may react that way. And it depends on our history, it depends on the triggers that we have. And that is extremely difficult to tell because there are people that we would have never expected that might do that. It's the same thing. You hear it all the time. Somebody walks into the house, they catch their significant other cheating on them, and they kill everybody in the house, right? We talk about crimes of passion, and certainly that's true. It happens, right? And all of us have that potentiality. If I walked in and somebody was harming one of my kids or something like that, I would probably not have very much mercy on the person that was doing that. So, there are circumstances in life that make it easier for us to cross the line. And one of the things that I noticed when I was working, or I always believed when I was working as a corrections officer, is that all of us, not any single one of us, isn't a step away from ending up in that same place. So when I was a corrections officer, I always tried to treat people with humanity, right? Uh, I would try to identify with them and try to give them a little bit of respect. And then in turn, I got a lot of respect back. But then those were the same guys when I needed something done or there was a problem that was going on, would go over to the other person and say, hey, settle the fuck down. You don't want to cause problems for Ignatowski over there. I got a lot of respect that way because I treated people like human beings. Not everybody does that. And I think it's important to remember that we're only one step away. Vehicular manslaughter will end you up in prison, right? And you didn't mean to do it, but it happened, and you're going to spend some time in jail for that. And you better get comfortable with the people that you're going to have to deal with in there. They may not come from the same place that you came from, so it's difficult. We're only one step away from that possibility happening. So I try not to look down on anybody.
And it's an interesting story. Not that you want to see it happen, but it does, especially in that environment when you're talking in jail and things. But I heard you in that one conversation that I was listening to. You mentioned about a race riot potentially happening when you were CO, but the guys from both crews showed you the respect. Do you mind telling that story or?
Oh yeah, no. I was working in a jail at the time, and I went into work in the morning, and that was I was in a spot where there was one CO to 64 inmates. Now I don't know about you, but I mean I can fight. I fought for a long
Not
time,
64
but
one time.
yeah, I can't handle 64 people. like like that's not possible. If they wanted to whoop my ass and kill me before anybody else got in there, I'd be dead. So I got in there. I walked in, and somebody had said, "Hey, they're talking about rioting," and I'm like, "Oh no, like what?" And now I got to be in there for the next 8 hours with these guys. And I walked in, and I walked up to the desk. I debriefed with the guys that were there on the shift before me, and they told me that it was getting pretty tense in there. And I get in there, and I see the white guys on one side of the room. I see the black guys on the other side of the room. And I'm thinking, oh shit, this is bad. Like,
You
I don't know
felt
what's
that
going to happen
tension.
here. There was a lot of tension. And so I walked over, and I was doing my walk around the dorm. And I happen to know both of the leaders of both sides. And I went up and I talked to them. I'm like, hey, listen, I know y'all are having some problems today. I know that there's some tension in here. I can feel it. I go home at 2 o'clock. I would prefer if you didn't make me involved in this. If y'all are going to do what you're going to do, wait until I go home because I don't want to deal with this shit. And I was like, y'all want to work out in the corner? You want to do push ups? You want to go to sleep? Go do your thing. I won't bother you as long as y'all don't bother me. So I walked around. I talked to the leader of the opposite side and told them kind of the same thing. I said, listen, y'all police yourselves, like take care of it. But wait until I leave if you all need to throw down because I don't want to be part of this. And so they were all pretty cool with me in that dorm. And sure enough, I got off of work at 2 o'clock. I left, and within 15 minutes, there was a riot in that dorm. Now, that says a lot about the respect that I got from all of those guys, because there's no way that I could have handled that as one single solitary guy in there. If 64 people coming after me or fighting each other, there's no way that I'm going to be able to stop that. And I think they had to call in, 10 or 15 officers to break it up. But I was already out of the building by that time. I was going home. I was quite grateful for that, and had an even better rapport when I went back in there the next day. Of course, a lot of the people that started it were no longer there. They moved them to the back pod and everything else, and several of them were in isolation. But it's how those things go.
Exactly. I had in my notes, it's funny, uh, that there are things that might seem to be fucked up to others, but in some cases seem normal to people. Does that make sense? I don't know if it's a mental
Yeah,
health thing or how much do you see
yeah.
with that with the serial killers and such?
Oh, there are all kinds of things, right? Things that seem normal to me, like for example, I grew up in a household where everybody yelled at each other, right? And that was just normal conversation, right? When I moved to the middle of the country and I live in Cincinnati now, there were a lot of people that were not used to that. And so I had to learn how to deal with people from here that don't experience screaming at each other all the time to get your point across. And so what was normal to me was not normal to anybody else that lived here.
Or
But then,
bluntness.
yes, yeah, bluntness. The fact that I have no problem telling somebody to go fuck themselves if I don't like what you're saying. But that is I'm from the East Coast. You should probably expect that if you decide to have a conversation with me. I'm usually pretty easy to get along with, but if we're in one of those conversations, I have no problem speaking my mind. Uh,
We don't mind telling
but
you to go fly a fucking kite.
so I think that, but when you're talking about killers specifically, there are a lot of weird paraphilias that happen. And so, what may be normal to them may not be normal to the rest of us. There, we can talk about some simple things in society right now, right? There are hundreds of thousands of people making money off of feet pics right now, right? People going on
Okay,
to
Tony Atlas,
OnlyFans,
relax, sir.
people going on there and paying for all kinds of money. But where that would not be normal for a lot of us, it's normal for them. They love it. Now, you know, it's how normal that is very, very subjective. I have never been into that sort of thing. I don't like looking at people's feet to begin with. So I'm certainly not paying any money to watch somebody oil up their feet or like smash mashed potatoes with them or anything. But there are plenty of people out there that pay money for that shit. Is that harmless? Maybe so. If it goes into cutting women's feet off and putting them in the freezer, probably not harmless. That could be a problem. So, it really depends on how deep those paraphilias go. Plenty of people into BDSM, right? As long as it stays in their own bedroom and doesn't involve kidnapping and harming non-consenting other people, then it's just fine. Not a problem. Not everybody finds it normal. Some people love it. But if you're going out there like David Parker Ray and kidnapping people, throwing them in your van, and assaulting them for a month at a time, probably a bad thing. That's not good. That's when you take the paraphilia way too far.
Okay, we were having a little laugh about this right before we hit the red button, but I'll go with this direction with it. I was talking to a fellow expert in your field, EJ Harmon, and
Hammond, you're killing
yeah,
me.
excuse me,
EJ
Hammond,
Hammond.
new to the Fort Wayne area, from what she was telling me.
She
So,
is.
she mentioned that a little while ago when we were talking this afternoon too. But what's it like for you? Because there's more and more people who have become experts. Like I talk to Michael Hawley often, who's a Jack the Ripper. Brian, who you've been talking to, Mr. Young, uh, yourself, EJ, whatnot. So, what is the writing process, either for the game, this book, or the upcoming books, and just the collaborations you do within EJ or a Kevin Sullivan, a Bob M, etc.?
Lots and lots of research. And then having
How many
people
rabbit
review
holes
it.
too?
Oh, yeah. And then having people review it and be like, I read the actual case files and that's not correct. Because I had that happen a couple times too. And here's the thing, the book that I wrote is really all about the myths and legends themselves, right? So I kind of gave myself an out because I'm writing about the things that may or may not be true. They may be the common misconceptions that we have about some of these cases. So it gives me a lot of liberty to say things that may or may not be accurate fact, but then I can talk about what the actual facts are and either disprove it or provide more, because some of them are not answerable, right? We don't know who the Zodiac was. We don't know who Jack the Ripper was. So there's no answer to that question. So then we just pose the theories that are out there and then shine and highlight ones that we think may or may not have more weight. And then we talk about those. So I think that it's important to look at it from that perspective, because as forensics changes, as we get better and better at doing research, as new evidence comes out, our opinions about things are going to change. There's been books written specifically. Right now, we have the whole Delphi murders that are going on, and the case against Richard Allen, which is happening right now as we speak. Well, probably not right now, but today was happening. But there were books written about the Delphi murders. Well, now that they've caught somebody, the books that are being written now are very different from the books that were written before, because we had less information when those books were written. Now we have more information. So some of those things have been changed or altered or updated so that we have more accurate information. So I think that the whole point of the book is being able to take a more critical eye and really looking at things and forming your own opinions about them and not listening to anybody else, including myself, right? I am not the be all end all on any one of these cases. I know a little bit. I don't know them fully, and I'm certainly not the be all end all expert on any of this stuff. But what I do know is that I know if we look at it and we really look at it deeply, we can come to our own answers about how we feel about things, about what evidence speaks to us, and the direction that we want to go, which is why I provide a lot of recommended reading in the book so that you can dive deeper into these things even further than I'm willing to go. Because I mean, I did 3 myths and a legend. Some of these killers, there are hundreds of myths about them. Some of them crazy. Some of them, maybe it's true. So, I think that the whole thing is let's jump into the deep end together and let's see what we find because that is what's important. It is not important to watch this documentary or that documentary and take it as gospel because every single one of those have an agenda. So like look at it, watch it, see what resonates with you. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, fine. Go find somebody else's opinion. Look at that, see what research they did, see where they come from about it, and then put those two together and see where you're at. Because ultimately, you're the one that matters. None of these other fuckers matter, right? They did research. They're not the be all end all either because they weren't there. They didn't. They weren't the ones committing the crime. That's really the only person that has any authority on any of these things because they understand their motivations, even if they won't say it, right? So anyway,
Well, looking at some of the comments as we're talking there, and Andrew B. Dodge from Unforbidden Truth podcast has checked
yay!
in saying how much of a great guy you are. So Andrew, we're going to need a drug test from you. So, but he does say you're the man, the myth, the legend, and he actually has a copy of the book signed in crayon by
Yes.
you. So, but Andrew was checking in. So Andrew, I don't know how long you've been checked in, but we were I was referencing some of the work you did with Jeff here a little while ago because I was watching this afternoon on YouTube. So thank you for checking in, brother. What was I going to ask there? Oh, let's see. Oh, speaking of the book, in that conversation, I believe it was with Andrew there, you mentioned about ending the book with Dennis. So, what was the reason of ending the book with Dennis?
So really it was so the book runs chronologically, right? It runs from Elizabeth Bathory to Dennis Rader. So we cover some 400 plus years of history in that book. And I remember when I said that I have some OCD tendencies. Well, I
You?
like
No, I can't see that.
I like order and I like formats when I do things. And so the book is no different, right? I start out with a very simple format. I start off with history. And so we go through a brief history of each of these different killers, going through their life. And I'm trying to sum it up, right? It's not an exhaustive thing. So I try to sum it up pretty easily. And then we move into the myths and the legends of these different killers. So I wanted to start off as early as I possibly could with Elizabeth Bathory, and then Dennis just happens to be the latest in that line. Of course, he was caught. I can't remember when now. In the 2000s, right, is when he was caught. So the most recent person to be arrested for his crimes, and so he ended up being the last chapter. But what's unique about that is he is the only one out of all of those people, because everybody else in the book is dead. He's the only one that's still alive, and consequently, the only one that I actually talk to. So I have some rapport with Dennis, and so he knew all about the book. Was very excited about the cover of the book, because he's on there right next to his idol, H.H. Holmes. So Dennis is on the very left. H.H. Holmes is next to him. I did not do that on purpose. That was the publisher, Wild Blue Press, that put together the cover for my ramshackle cover design that I first did. They got rid of that one and they came up with this one that is much, much better than I could do because they may understand how to sell books. So, but they put that up there, and Dennis was very excited about that. And the last legend in the book, I actually cover because Dennis asked me to. I asked him what were some myths, what were some legends that he thinks that I should cover, and the legend that he wanted me to cover was the legend that he is actually the Zodiac. So I talk about that. There's a lady that writes a book about that. I can't remember what it's called right now, but anyway, there's a book about all of these connections between the Zodiac and Dennis Rader, and so I use a lot of the material from that book to talk about that legend. And now talking to Dennis himself about it, you know, he can't give me any definitive answer, but he just kind of laughed about it. He thought it was funny that they questioned him 3 or 4 times about being the Zodiac. There are some interesting things there. There's no real weight to it. I don't believe Dennis was the Zodiac, but it's interesting. The theory is interesting. It's something to look at. But there's a couple of things in there, like the myth I put in there that Dennis liked to kill is the first myth that I go over. And, you know, you may think that that is obvious for somebody who killed, I think, 10 or 11 people, that he liked it. But I don't think that that's why Dennis killed. I don't believe that it had to do with having a bloodlust as much as it had to do with control. And I think those two things are very, very different. I think Dennis got off on the control. I don't think that he got off on the killing itself. Killing was a necessity for him because he didn't want to be caught and he thought he was smarter than everybody else. But ultimately, it was the control over those people. It was the control over the families. It was the control of being able to wear their clothes and become them that really drove him to do what he did. And I think that is fascinating. Matter of fact, there's an excerpt from the book that I shared with Dennis, and it's always interesting for me to hear the response about what I think, like psychologically about someone, and to hear what they actually think. And I think that that is fascinating. But anyway.
So, you know, hey, Matt, I know you said a lot of the stuff you heard so far, Jeff has touched on. So, but you did have a compliment and such, which is hard to believe for Jeff. But do you want to come on and share what you shared with me? Give him a second to, yeah,
Find that
that way you
unmute
can
button.
hear from the horse's mouth. So, and I'm not talking Mr. Ed there. There he is. He's popping in now.
Hey,
Hey, Matt.
I just wanted to say how interesting it was to listen to all the psychology of serial killers and whatnot, and just how cool it was, you know, to get the opportunity to listen to you. And I definitely will be checking out your book. Whether I win it tonight or not, I definitely will be getting it
Sweet.
on Audible or getting a physical copy. Yeah.
Sweet, man. I appreciate it.
We will help that out. And you were telling me, Matt, not to throw you under the bus. You were telling me earlier when you reached out to say, yes, I want in, that your mother is a fan of like the ID channel and these different shows that you see.
She watches that stuff obsessively. I do too.
What?
Like I would.
Matt, you froze, brother.
Yeah, I think he went outside
on
and the
MS
Wi-Fi.
yesterday, so I'm definitely intrigued
Hold
by stuff
on.
myself.
We lost you part of the way there, dude.
Oh shoot! Can you see me now?
We
I was
got
going
you.
out to the porch. You got me? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, did
Yeah,
you
I
hear the
think,
part I said I was just watching the documentary?
Which one?
God, I can't remember what it was called. I know it was on MGM Plus. Like they were just going into all sorts of course, you know, his childhood and stuff, and pretty much
For
everything in
who?
his film inspirations. You know, he inspired Norman Bates,
Oh, you're
Leatherface,
talking about Ed Gein. Yeah.
Ed Gein.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, am
And
I cutting out left and right?
no, you're good.
No.
Oh, okay,
I just
cool,
didn't catch that.
nice.
So, in the book, I cover a bunch of Ed Gein's influence on the horror industry specifically, because I think it's
Yes,
fascinating just how much the movie monsters and the movie psychopaths and everything were so influenced by Ed Gein. Now, this is a guy that really wasn't a serial killer. I do cover him in the book, but
right.
uh, classically, he would have not been considered a serial killer. He was more of a grave robber that had some real psychological issues revolving around his crazy, uh, overburdening mother, who caused him a lot of psychological issues in
Right.
his life. And he wanted to either bring her back from the dead or he wanted to become his mother, one of the two. And of course,
Did he
we
keep
see that
her? Did he like
he
keep her in a
did not.
rocking chair? He did not keep
He
her, so
did
it wasn't
not.
like Norman
No,
Bates or anything. Okay,
no,
I haven't finished the
no. He
documentary yet, but
Yeah, he did not keep her, but he did keep her room, supposedly exactly as it was when she lived there,
oh
when she
wow,
was alive. Now, I don't know if he ever dug up his mother or not. There's always been some speculation about that. Did he dig her up? And really, why didn't he? He was digging up everybody else. So why
right,
wouldn't he have dug up his own mother if he thought that he was going to be able? I think maybe he didn't do it because he believed that if he like constructed his perfect woman. I think maybe if he actually did that, maybe he then would have dug her up and tried to do some crazy shit like from the Chucky series, right? Where he like transfers the body.
yeah,
So I don't know if he would have tried that or not, but it would have been interesting if he had the opportunity. But
yeah. That is crazy.
you never know, like especially for him, like there were a lot of things. I should hang this up and show it to you guys. I have one of the detective magazines that is shown in some of the pictures of his house. I have a copy of that here at the house. I just
Holy
got it.
cow!
I haven't even hung it up on the wall yet. But my buddy Joe Hiles has that same issue, and he was sharing it with me, and I was like, dude, I need that. And I just found one like a week or two ago and got it. So I was super excited to have a little piece of Ed Gein uh, history. But Ed Gein was into a lot of weird shit, right? He was
Did he do the
he
human
was
skin furniture thing? That did he really like?
he
Did he make
did.
things?
So
Oh god!
he did, but it's not like what you think. Like he never made any lampshades or anything like that. That was never
Okay,
proven. He did have a chair. He had two chairs that had some human skin on the front of them. But honestly, if you didn't know, you would have thought that it was just regular leather. You would have never
okay. So it's
known. Uh,
exaggerated.
yeah, a lot of that stuff is exaggerated when it comes to Ed Gein. He did have chalices that were made out of human skulls. That's true. But you know, it's interesting with Ed Gein, just the amount of myths that came out of that, just like you're referring to now. But Ed is fascinating when it comes to his mindset, like why he did what he did. He was really into Nazism, right? And he was into some of the Nazi theories and some of the Nazi torture. So that's really where he got a lot of the ideas about making things from human skin with some of the experiments that the Nazis were doing on people and some of the tortures that they were doing. He was a
Oh
particular
wow!
fan of one of the women who was doing that, and it was like in a bunch of magazines and stuff, and he would really like get excited about that. So, it's fascinating, like what drives somebody to do those types of things. And we know that Ed Gein
Absolutely.
was fairly low functioning to begin with, and so like he wasn't the smartest guy. His mother really led him around and really controlled his life. And then once she was dead, this guy has no other outlet, so he's trying to figure out like how do I deal with life now? And he gets involved in all these crime books and all these detective magazines and all this crazy Nazi stuff. And so it becomes a real issue for him where he's wanting to emulate those things. And so, for him, we know how that turns out and what he ends up doing, and the grave robbing and the taking of body parts and things like that. But again, it's another misconception. We all think that Ed Gein was a cannibal, and he was not. Right? He
Oh
was not a
wow.
cannibal at all. As far as we know, he never ate anybody. So it's interesting, and all of that stuff. Minus a few of those things I cover in the book. But yeah, we talk a lot about him being a cannibal, if he was or he wasn't. But yeah, Ed Gein is a fascinating case. It's fascinated people for the last
That's
60 years.
that is really interesting. I had no idea about the Nazi influences or anything like that.
Yeah.
I
Well,
gotta
you
ask
got to
because
remember.
sorry, go ahead, and I'll ask the question.
No, I
Oh,
just got
but
one more question.
uh-huh.
What is your opinion on the Delphi murders? Do you think that the guy that's in custody, I can't recall his name, do you think that he's the guy, or do you think there's any chances that there's another person that's, the
So
actual?
I I have not watched any of the trial that's currently going on, so I don't know. Going into the trial, I did not believe he was the guy. So I don't know what information has come out now and if that information would sway my
I don't
opinion.
either.
But going into it with the information that I had beforehand and some of the background information that I had, I did not think that Richard Allen was the guy. I think that there is something to be said for this whole Odinistic cult that may be out there. They talked a lot about the Odinism, and I think that there may be something to that. I think that if that is the case, then that is some scary shit that is happening in Delphi. And
Yeah.
how far up the line does that go? I don't know, and I don't know that that will come out in trial. So I don't know what they got in, what they didn't get in. I need to do some more research and dive into some of the sources
Me
that have been
too.
covering the trial. But I've been kind of out of the loop for the last couple of weeks. I've had a bunch of crazy personal stuff going on in a bunch of conventions that I've been at. So I have not been in the loop on that, and I need to catch up.
Right.
So I had an opinion. It was not Richard Allen, but that may change depending on what they bring up in trial.
Right.
Maybe it is Richard Allen. If it is, then I'm glad they caught him. I hope he goes away forever.
Absolutely.
If it's not, I hope they figure out who the hell it is and they catch those people. And if it really does go up the line to police officers and corrections officers and judges and all kinds of shit, I hope they all go to jail. So
Absolutely.
there you go.
Exactly. When I first heard it, like, you just hope that more evidence would come out, more, like he absolutely did it without a shadow of a doubt evidence. But yeah, thank you for that input.
Stay tight, Matt, because I know you've seen the movie, but correct me if I'm wrong, and I know if I'm wrong, I'm gonna get a goddamn text about this from Mr. Hodder, because I know word will get back to him and all that fun stuff. But didn't
That he
Kane
did the
Hodder
Gein
play a role of Ed Gein?
Yes, he did. I have it here
Okay.
at the house.
Whew.
And,
Because like I said,
and
I know
so
I get a text about that. What the fuck?
he also played Dennis Rader. He
Okay.
also played Dennis Rader in the BTK movie. So you know that there's a long-standing kind of joke between me and Kane that I will never get his autograph because I hate Jason Voorhees. I'm not a fan, even though if I had a favorite Jason, it would be Kane Hodder. I am a Michael Myers guy 100% of the way. And so there's always been this joke that I won't do that. And then he told me that he played Gein and he played BTK. So I'm like, shit, maybe I do have to get his autograph at some point. I still have not, by the way. And last time I saw him, I wore my Michael Myers shirt that says "Simply the best, better than all the rest." And
Would
he
that
told
have
me
been
to go
at
fuck myself.
Scarefest, if I remember
It
correctly?
was. It was.
And
Yeah, he told me to go fuck myself too. It was good.
yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about right with him. But it's
Yep.
funny, and I can show this without giving away personal information. But as you were talking to Matt there, I was getting texts from one of the heroes from Part 7.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because I just talked to him the other day on Tuesday, and he was
Part seven was Manhattan, right?
No, that was 8.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because that's
Telekinesis
the
with Laura Park Lincoln.
okay. So that was the first one that Kane was in, was
Yes.
Jason Takes Manhattan, and
What's
that
the
is
next
my
one?
favorite. Yeah, that's my favorite Friday the 13th movie.
Yeah.
So if I had to choose one, it happens to be Kane. Don't let him know that, because he'll never
I,
let me live that shit down. But
no.
you know,
Yeah. And I know word will get back to him because his ears tend to ring when anybody talks about him. So I
oh
know
yeah, for
my
sure.
I know my phone will go off. What the hell? You son of a bitch. I knew it. I knew that, Jeff, No. But
Yeah.
crap. Hey Jody, you sent me a message as well about a museum and such. Do you want to come back to
Yeah, I was just wondering if you've heard of the Zach Bagans Haunted Museum. It's in Vegas. I used to
Yep,
watch
I've
Ghost
been there.
Adventures back in the day. Have you been there?
Yeah,
I was
I
just
have.
curious of what you
I've been
thought of
there.
it because I know he has got paintings from Manson and stuff, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah,
He has a blood painting of
yeah,
Manson that was
yeah.
done by, I forget
That's what it was.
the artist's name, but he has that. He also has Manson's ashes. He's got
Yeah,
a bunch of other things from Manson there. He has a bunch of the stuff from Bundy there.
yeah.
He's got Bundy's ski mask
Oh
and the
wow.
ice pick that was in the back of the car, the Volkswagen.
Oh
But
wow.
yeah, he's got a whole room devoted to Bob Berdella, who was the
Yeah,
Kansas City butcher. And so, like, actually, that was the first time I had really heard of Berdella. And, I did a bunch of research after that. And I was just in Kansas City at the beginning of this year for a show. And of course, I have Berdella is in Killers the Card Game. And so everybody was like, oh my God, I used to go to his shop and all of this stuff. So I met a lot of people that had experiences with Bob Berdella specifically. And that was really, really interesting to
wow.
get to talk to some of those people and they thought he was really weird. And then I met a guy when I was in Chicago that actually got sued by Berdella, and he was telling me that he was his jewelry dealer. So he was making jewelry and stuff for Bob, and he got like a real weird feeling from him and decided he was only going to deliver half of the jewelry. Well, Bob sued him, and they went to court over it. Now, the guy won the court case. And when they went out into the hallway afterwards, Bob got in his face and said, "You're going to regret that." And the guy,
Oh no.
instead of taking the elevator, took the stairs. And I looked at him and I said, uh, and Jonathan, you'll understand this. I looked at him and I said, "I believe that old Bob wanted you in his bedroom." And the guy got white as a sheet, man. And he looked at me and he was like, he had never ever thought of that before. And I'm like, you realize this guy like tortured 12 men to death, right? And so like, I think probably that's what he was talking about. I also met another
Yeah.
guy a
Go
couple of
stairs and
weeks ago
run.
when I was in Jacksonville. This is a crazy story. I've told this a couple times now, but I met this dude there in Jacksonville. So Bundy, of course, went from the Chi Omega murders right there in Tallahassee, and he drove across the state to Jacksonville. This guy happened to be at the gas station one night getting gas, and this white van pulled up to him. Guy got out with a button-down shirt and a tie on, and asked him for directions to get back to I-10 to go back over to Lake City, right? And so, of course, he tells me that weeks later, Bundy is plastered all over the news because he's caught over there past Tallahassee. And so when they catch him, he's like, holy shit, that was the guy. I saw him. I talked to him. And so he tells me this whole story. And I look at him and I said, now the question is, did you give him good directions? And he stops and he gets this crazy puzzled look on his face. And he said, and he looks at me, and I could tell that he was ashamed, right? He felt shame about it. And he looked at me and he said, well, I did. I did. I really gave him good directions. And I said to him, I said, listen, Bundy would have found his way no matter what. It is not your fault, right? because what we know from, creating the timeline and everything, when Bundy went to Jacksonville, when he was in Jacksonville, he tried to kidnap a girl at a school. The brother came out and stopped him. That is when that night he drives back down to Lake City, and the next day he kidnaps Kimberly Leach, who ends up being his last victim. So this guy was the one that gave Bundy the directions on how to get back to Lake City. Now, I told EJ that story, and EJ said that when they were doing the research, because she is a Bundy expert herself, she has a website called the Bundy File, like Bibliophile. But anyway, she has a website for that. But she said that when they were tracking Bundy's movements from Denver down to Florida, the one thing that they noticed is that Bundy was not good with directions. He was terrible with directions, had a hard time reading a map. Of course, this is back in the day. You're talking in the 70s, 78, I think, 77, 78, when all you had was a map. There was no GPS, right? GPS couldn't take you anywhere because there were no satellites back then. So you had to use a map. You had to ask for directions. And so apparently he did that a lot. And it was not out of the realm of possibilities that for sure he asked this guy for directions one night at a gas station and got directions to go back to get his last victim. So,
Wow.
it's crazy. You never know who you're going to run into when I do all these conventions all across the country. And I'm talking about my books, and I'm talking about there are so many people that have had random chance encounters with some of these killers. It is unbelievable to me how small the world is. One day I'm going to
One of
write.
my mom's friends bumped into Paul Bernardo in Toronto. I don't know if you know about in Canada, right? Paul Bernardo.
Oh yeah,
You heard about that
yeah.
one? Yeah, when he was
And Carla
the
Homolka.
Scarborough rapist first. He was first a Scarborough rapist, and he approached my mom's friend back in the 80s. And she was getting on a bus, and she's like got this weird vibe. He was trying to hit on her, and she just ran. I was like,
How
that's
old was she?
scary, right? So, oh gosh, probably in her 30s, early 20 or 20s, early 30s, because I was just young. Like I was
Yeah.
probably 8 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, we know that later on, Paul Bernardo's type was not that old.
Yeah, but at first
when,
they were labeling him as the Scarborough rapist, so there was a lot. I
yeah,
don't know if it ended up so. There was that beforehand, but then yes, he was into the younger
yeah,
stuff. So
he would when he was busy before, and so that's something interesting psychologically, right?
yeah,
Uh, from what we know of Paul Bernardo, he didn't kill until him and Carla got together.
right.
Right? He
He
raped
was labeled
probably
as the rapist
hundreds.
before, just the
Yeah,
rapist, right? Yeah,
yeah. So he was raping women for probably 10 years
yeah,
when he met Carla Homolka. And after those two met, and Carla gave him her sister, and they
yeah,
inadvertently killed the sister. It wasn't on purpose. They drugged her and then held her hand over her nose and her mouth while he was raping her, and she ended up dying. She aspirated and died. And so, after that is when he really when the two of them, not just him, the
yeah.
two of them
It's
started
both of
killing.
them. Yeah,
Yeah, and so
and
which
she
is
pretty
even
much got off with it
scarier,
all. Yeah,
correct? Because she blamed it
yeah,
all on him, and she's now out. I
yeah,
believe she's married and has a couple kids.
yep,
But yeah,
yep.
it's wild.
St.
Wild,
Catharines is where my stepsisters used to live. Yeah, it's scary,
crazy
small
shit.
world, right? And like, think about it, and how many serial killers are actually active and out there now too. So it's so easily to bump into them, and you wouldn't even know it.
For sure.
Thank you for that.
Nice.
Absolutely.
I actually have a hold on, let's see. I gotta shorten a message because she asked on IG. But hey, Ray, did you have anything why I send this message that you want to bring up? Because obviously you don't want to keep Jeff all night and want to give away the book too before we call it all said and done. I'll ask this. Because I saw this firsthand with Jeff when he did show in Philadelphia recently, and that was we stopped at Angelo Bruno's house in South
Oh yeah.
Philly. So, what is it about the mob that you really like, or got you
Oh
fascinated?
man. So I grew up, and you know, Jonathan knows this. I grew up right outside of Philly, right? That is hometown for me. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, which is about, I don't know, it depends on how fast you drive. It's about a
15, 20
40-minute drive.
minutes?
Yeah, I've made it in 13 minutes from Wilmington to Philly. But we were driving
It's
like
doable,
140
folks.
miles an hour. But, you know, anyway, but I grew up, half of my family, I am not Italian at all. Not, I don't have any Italian blood in me. I'm half Filipino, a quarter Polish, and a quarter German. However, uh, a lot of my family was all married in Italian because there's a high propensity of Italian people in that area, right? So we grew up there, and so half of my family owned restaurants in the area, and they were all fronts for the mob in the early '70s, right? And so I grew up around and just this culture of this whole familia thing. You know, I grew up in the middle of that, and my dad was friends with Angelo Bruno. So actually, when we went over to Angie's house and we were there, you know, I was doing a video and collecting the dirt. And it's really funny that it's like literally right next door to a 7-Eleven. We parked in the 7-Eleven parking lot. And then I
I
walked
went and got
two
a drink
steps
before you
over.
started the video.
Yeah. But anyway, Angelo Bruno was killed right in front of his house. He was smoking a cigarette in his car. A guy came up from the side of the window with a shotgun and blew his brains out. It's a very famous picture that you see whenever you look at all the mob hits. The guy sitting in his Cadillac with his mouth hanging open. That was old Angelo Bruno. He was killed about 6 months before I was born in 1980. Uh, but my dad was good friends with him, actually had a sit down with him about 3 weeks before they killed him. And they killed him to get control of Atlantic City because Angie had control of Atlantic City and the Philadelphia mob had control of that for about 30 years before the Gambino family took it over. I don't know who has control of it now, but obviously they run it into the ground because, as we were talking about before the show came on, Atlantic City is not a great place to be. You know, it used to be the Vegas of the East. It is no longer that. It is. It is not. Even when I was a kid, it was declining. But yeah, so that has always been kind of my interest. I've been around it my whole life. My dad wanted to be a hitman, all kinds of shit. So I kind of grew up with this mentality. So it's always been fascinating to me, the whole inner workings. And I will cover a bunch of it in volume 2 of the book. I'll talk about a whole bunch of that. We'll get into Lucky Luciano. We'll talk about John Gotti. We'll talk about Richard Kuklinski, who, of course, was not Italian, but was Polish. And it's interesting because I'm also a Polak.
Nice. Well, we've been talking and other things beyond the headlines, true crimes, myths, and legends. Serial Killers, Volume 1. Obviously, you've been a bestseller on Amazon, even however long you want to say it. But what's the biggest response been for the book so far that you've heard?
You know, I just did a podcast on Darkness Radio, and the guy who interviewed me on there, awesome guy, Tim Dennis, I believe. I'll actually see him in a couple of weeks. I'll be at a show that he's at, which would be nice. But anyway, regardless of that, uh, he gave me some of my favorite feedback from the book so far. And he had read it over the weekend, and he said that he loved it. It was hard to put down because it's very short. Like it's 236 pages. It's not that short, but it is the way it's written is in very bite-sized chunks, so you can read it and jump on to the next chapter and read it pretty quickly. And but even with it being a quick read, there are a lot of things that I get into that are very deep in the book. So it's not just like even if you are a true crime fanatic, like a lot of us are, and we watch all the documentaries, you will get the book and you will still find things that you didn't know. or things that never occurred to you before, or things that you want to dive into deeper and look at and explore. And that is the whole point of the book. I wanted to give people something that they could do further research, that they could dive in even deeper if they wanted to really, really find out the truth behind a lot of these stories that we often take at face value.
So obviously you've been quite busy. There's a part for Killers the card game that you've been working on, but you said you've been lazy on getting out. But you
Yeah,
have the
that's for sure.
book. You've been doing a lot with the Scorpion Lair games. So where do you see the rest of 2024 going for you, Jeff?
So I just released my newest game called The Profiler, which is literally a large party game that drops you right into crime scene investigation. That's the whole point. It is a game where uh, it's kind of like playing like Werewolf or Blood on the Clock Tower, where you're trying to figure out who the killer is and figure out what kind of killer they are to win the game. But it's all taken directly from like the FBI profiles and stuff. So it's very accurate, but drops you right into looking at crime scenes and evidence and trying to figure out who's doing this and why they're doing it. So there's an element of psychology to it, which I love to do. And so that just got released. I am still working on by the end of the year, probably October, November, maybe December release for the next expansion for Killers the card game. The accomplices or the experts and the accomplices that will come out. And then next year, right behind me, over this way, there we go. That right there, Step Right Up, Rule the Sideshow will be my game for next year, as well as soon as I can get it done, the writing for Beyond the Headlines Volume 2, I need to get out. So hopefully by the end of the year, that manuscript will be ready to go, and we'll be able to drop it to my publisher, and we can start working on that for early release next year is the hope.
Well, I was killing time for this to happen, and it's been a while since I physically have seen her, but she's a true crime fan as well. Tiff, how the hell you been?
Excellent. Just living the dream.
Oh, exactly. And Tiff, I'll tell you this, and I didn't know this until earlier this afternoon with Jeff, and I'll have to get you a copy of the book when all said and done. We'll figure that out. It would run right up your alley with being into cooking and stuff.
Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what's up.
Oh yeah.
Of course he started at Wendy's, but that's a whole nother conversation for another time.
My former head chef said, just get in there and do it and learn as much as possible.
All right.
Absolutely.
So what about the true crime do you like, Tiff?
First of all, I like that most people get caught because they think they're not going to get caught. And I guess I got this twisted interest in humankind. Like I like to know how people's minds work, and sometimes know that I might have thought something, but I didn't go ahead and do something, and that keeps me safe and happy.
Well, I'll put it this way, Jeff. I'll put it this way before you respond to that without going into full detail, because it's not the time or the place. But how I met Tiff, I can see that being 100% true because of what she was, at least. I don't know currently because it's been a little bit since we talked, but what she was doing for a profession for a bit. So,
Interesting.
I always tell people it takes a lot of energy to be a good person. Everybody's got their stuff or whatever, but people who have been, I would say victimized or pushed or to the edge and to just be able to, really like, I don't know, make peace with the fact that not everybody's a good person and you don't have to act like anybody else. I fear for the person who, brings that out, of me.
Oh, for sure. For sure. So, all right, now I'll respond.
Go ahead.
There are two kinds of people that get into true crime. The large part of those people that are really interested in true crime are, they always ask the question, why? How? Why and how are there two questions, right? Why and how could someone do something like that? Mainly because it's foreign to them, because they think that they could never go to that length, which is, I believe, untrue. But they all think that, like, oh my God, I just don't know how somebody could do that. So that is one kind of person. The other kind of person that's really into true crime are the people like me and Tiff over here, that always want to understand why we haven't done it yet, right? Because we have struggled with the feelings, we have struggled with the impulsivity, we have struggled with the racing thoughts and the difficulty, and we've been victimized and had things happen in our lives that have taught us that the monster is there, but we figured out how to contain it. And one of the reasons why we get involved with true crime is because we want to learn better, more effective ways of continuing to contain that monster.
That part.
Because it is not wise, and we're smart enough to know that we got to keep it under control, or bad shit happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can completely identify with that.
Fist bump.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll say this, and when it comes to Tiff, because I truly do got to dance around this since it's a live episode, but she does stuff within the psychology field and also mental health field. I can say that. But Tiff, I can tell you, and she knows, and she'll tell you, I'm not one to kiss anybody's ass or any of that thing. But she will tell you straight up what she thinks and or whatever the situation is with that person. And that's one of the things I always respected about her, because she'll flat out tell you like me and Jeff were joking about the Northeast mentality about 10 minutes ago. Tiff has that same vibe, and she'll flat out tell you, be point blank with you, but we'll help you through that situation too.
Yeah, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for you, because I'm sure there's enough people in your life that are doing that. Like, let's get to the root of it and let's fix it. Let me help you.
I remember back in the day, Dennis Leary used to have a little bit that he did, right? Of course, Dennis Leary, another guy from the East Coast, and his humor is kind of in your face. He had this little bit called "fuck you therapy," right? And so he was somebody come in and talk to him and "fuck you," and they would say something just "fuck you," and I always thought that was interesting. Not because it's a bit, it's a comedy bit, but it's true, because there are so many people that have people that are enabling the behavior that they're doing, and they don't get told the truth, right? They get people that kowtow to them and allow them to continue in their bad behavior without somebody smacking them in the face with the truth. And sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes we need that strong person to say enough is enough. What you're doing is bullshit. You need to find another way to do it. And so I've always kind of been one of those people that I don't have a problem telling people exactly what I think. And if what you're doing is a bunch of horseshit, I will tell you that it is. Not for any other reason, but I think it's important that people get a dose of reality, because we live in a world that is getting further and further from reality. And we started out talking about all of this in the very beginning, that, as we get more and more automated and AI and all of this shit, what is reality? And reality ends up being the things that you can touch, feel, hopefully you can smell them, or maybe you don't want to.
Unless you have Tiff's cooking, but.
Yeah. So, I think that as we get further and further removed from that, people are going to need more and more of a dose of reality to understand that one of the things that we used to talk about all the time, because I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins, right? I've done a bunch of his coursework and everything. But one of the things that he talks about is that people change for one of two reasons. They either change because of pleasure or because of pain. Those are the only two reasons why we make choices in life, right? We either get to a place where it's so painful that we have no choice to we either die or we change, or you get so much pleasure from something, then you decide to go and do it because of that. And I've found that true in a lot of situations. But then you get people that will continue to do what they're doing, and you see these people that walk around with a black cloud over their head, right? And they can never get away from the bullshit that they're currently struggling with. And what they don't understand is a lot of times they're creating it themselves, right? It's not just circumstance. It is because you decide to relate everything to that same horseshit that you continue to believe over and over and over again. Very, very difficult to talk to those people and give them perspective, because life can be radically different in 5 years, right? We could be doing one thing, could have all kinds of horrible shit happen. And within 5 years, you'll see people go from nothing to a millionaire, right? Not that that doesn't bring a whole different host of problems, because it does. You see plenty of millionaires blow their brains out all the time, right? So it is not a solution, and I'm not suggesting that money is a solution, but the perspective in there changed, and they have made a conscious choice to live a different life and not let that same bullshit hold them back that was at one time. Or maybe they figured out a way to capitalize off of the bullshit that they had formerly, and they've found a way to monetize that, because lots of people do that too. You see victims do that all the time. Not saying that it's right or wrong, but you'll see someone who is victimized now end up running a nonprofit or writing books about their experience. And that is a good thing. That is a healthy way to deal with that. But in our society, often that is a way, if you can find the right way, you can monetize that. And so, and I mean, I can't say anything. I've done a similar thing myself. I have taken my experiences and my life and tried to find a way to find a path in my own life where I could do something that I love, because I'm sick of doing things that I hate, right? And so who wants to work somewhere where you're miserable all the time, and you don't want to do that when I can go out and do things that give me energy and that I enjoy and that I never want to stop because I love doing it. So, that's where we all aspire to be. And so that is a healthy thing. And I completely lost where the fuck I was going with all of this. But
It doesn't
that
matter,
happens
because
sometimes.
you got where you needed to be.
Yeah,
But
funny.
that's normal for you anyway, Jeff.
It is. It is for sure.
Well, let me throw this out there since Tiff just joined us. With that volley that Jeff threw up, do you have a response from your knowledge and everything?
I mean, I agree with everything you said. So, I think like
Hit the checks in the mail.
the what I had a thought when you were talking about AI and reality and technology, like all that, everything, it makes everything so easy, and it makes everything, it makes reality, it kind of blurs the lines of reality and lets you escape reality. But I think that that's one of the places that, we start, like, in practice and, counseling, therapy, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes you have to reality check people. And, I've had to do it to myself. Like, hey, this is happening. This is happening. Is the result a good thing? No. Then you can't justify, you can't excuse what you're doing, even if it feels good, because you have a challenge, you have a problem, whatever. Something has happened to, slow you down, make maybe people that love you worried, whatever. If you can't explain it away and show me the positive outcome from it, then it's BS, whether you think it's reality or not. Like, I know you experience your own reality and all that, but if you're I'm gonna say, living in this society, you kind of like are ascribing to what society thinks a good citizen should be. How about that? And we all gotta agree on something. Like, there's extremes, of course, and everybody has their opinion, but we gotta agree on what would keep our society maybe safe, maybe not so happy, but positive or whatever. And when people start, basically, what I'm trying to say is when people start making excuses and saying, that the stuff that they're doing, which is not great stuff for them or anybody else, when they start trying to explain it away, you got to kind of come in and do that reality check. And when the interactions or communications that some people are having are not with real human beings, not with real nature, not, then there's none of that there to check them. So the checks and balances are off. So yeah, I don't know.
So
I lost my thought. Pat.
yeah, I think there's a couple of interesting things that you say there, and two of them specifically. One, and I need to go here in a second too, Jonathan, just so you know.
No, I know.
I have another podcast that I have to be on tonight. So
fuck them. No.
So what you said there is fascinating to me, because when we talk about serial killers and killers in general, one of the things that we know is that they have an altered sense of reality, right? They build up this huge fantasy life. I think one of the things that's very, very scary in our culture today is that there are lots of people that never engage in reality, and they live in the fantasy all the time. That shit is scary. When we have killers that all they've done is live in they build up this fantasy life. And sorry, I got distracted because all these screens are changing. But yeah,
sorry, because we're going to give away the book when you're done.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I think that is an interesting point, that as we live farther and further removed from reality and people live in the fantasy, what extra challenges do those make for all of us that are trying to make sense of the world around us? The other thing is I thought it was funny that you mentioned reality checking ourselves. And I have to do that frequently to myself. For those of you that have known me for a long time, there are times where I can be a little narcissistic. It happens, right?
Not Jeff.
Most people that are out there and are in the public eye and are extroverted have a few narcissistic tendencies. And there are times where I have to talk myself off the ledge, like I'm the best thing since sliced bread, and I have to remember that I'm not the only one out there. And, I haven't done everything, and I'm not nearly as significant as I like to think sometimes.
All right.
But
So
anyway.
I'm going to spin the wheel for the book. And as we pick the winner, Jeff, you got to tell me, and this is going inside baseball, when Ray, I'll hook you up with the information for the book so we can get you taken care of. But last quarter, so you can go do the other show. And when you were in Philadelphia, you were hanging out. Which was better? Because you and your buddy did a taste test, Pat's or Gino's.
Oh, man, you're going to throw that one at me. Okay.
Do it.
Yeah.
Say it.
I was a witness to this test that day, but go ahead.
Okay. So all of my life, I've been a Pat's guy, right? I've always liked Pat's better. We went there, and Pat's is doing some crazy reconstruction, and they're running it out.
They were in a trailer
truck right now,
yeah.
And I'll tell you that Gino's was 100 times better than Pat's when I was there. Now, I'm not saying when they finish the construction, Pat's won't be back to its former glory, but right now, go to Gino's because Pat's sucked.
That's up.
Jeff, thank you so much, and I'll have links to Amazon and all that fun stuff. Tiff, I'll obviously get you taken care of. Jeff, thanks, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.